Today's edition of the Spot Trek podcast is presented by Bettor Edge, where I smoked Brandon Kravitz one more time. Not really a huge Ohio State fan, but I will take the Ohio State Buckeyes over Texas on the big Thursday college weekend opener. BettorEdge.com is your place to start. Get that app in the iOS App Store. Use code SPOTTREK. Grab yourself $20 at registration and start making smart bets like I did. That's BettorEdge.com. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Monday, September 1st. September means football. September means baseball. September means almost hockey and almost basketball. We're here. It's actually the EPL, English Premier League transfer window deadline day. So I've been doing a lot of work on that, believe it or not. And there's a hell of a lot of NFL to get to, including a big old Micah Parsons contract extension in Green Bay. That'll be the focus of our first segment. We'll talk about some facts and figures from the 2025 season that are all detailed at SpotTrek.com right now, shortly thereafter. Okay, first up, for those of you watching on YouTube, thank you. Hit that subscribe button. Keep us going here. I've got the Micah Parsons contract from Spot Trek live on your window screen. We're going to go by this number by number because there's some fascinating points, and it's pretty much on par with every other massive blockbuster extension we've seen this offseason, with one kind of notable surprise, which is the Green Bay Packers just don't do this. Okay, yep. Jordan Love's contract looks like this, and that's it. Okay, even the old days of Aaron Rodgers never got a contract quite to this structure, and quite frankly, it's because the money's just getting out of control in a good way. All right, these players are compensated at least a good percentage point based on where the league revenue stands. Let's put it that way. But this is silly money for a lot of us normal folks sitting here on Labor Day, appreciating what we do for a living. Micah Parsons, 4 years, 186 new. That's base compensation. There's an extra $2 million available via incentives and escalators, tied to Pro Bowls and All-Pro incentives. $120 million of that is fully guaranteed at signing. And if you're of the mindset that that's the number you look at and that's enough, that's fine. It's a great starting point. But with most of these bigger contracts, you got to dig a little deeper. So if I tell you that the 120 is locked in right now, that is accurate, and that is into the 2027 season, so 2.5 seasons. But another $16 million is going to guarantee next March. All right. So that full 136 number that we heard about initially, that is the full guarantee. It's going to vest early. It is going to carry into the 2028 season. Okay. That's 3.1 million of 2027 and then 12.9 million in 2028, all with early vesting on it. That will become his locked and loaded by the 2027 March season, off season, essentially. All right. So that's the practicality on this thing. And when you spread that out over 4 years, there's $165 million cash to be earned across the next 4 seasons for Micah Parsons. So this is 4 for 165, unless we're talking about some pretty ugly buyouts. But 120 now, 136 early vesting, 165 total cash flow over the next 4 seasons. That's the practicality on this Micah Parsons contract. It's a nice big signing bonus, $44 million. There's a $38 million option bonus next year and a 34 and change option bonus thereafter. I've had some questions on the socials about how we treat those. I'll just be pretty honest with you. By default, the NFL treats those as prorated bonuses, those option bonuses. So just like the signing bonus, you'll see it for cap purposes spread out over 5 years. The same thing happens with those option bonuses. However, those bonuses have not yet been exercised. Yep, they're guaranteed or going to be guaranteed at a certain time here. So he's going to earn that money, Micah Parsons. But the Green Bay Packers do have the option of keeping that as one big lump salary in 2026 or 2027 versus taking it as a bonus, spreading it out over 5 years, and pushing a bunch of that dead cap down the line. 99 out of 100 teams do exercise the option bonus, push the cap down because, of course, there's more cap coming later, right? So it's a by and by conclusion, foregone conclusion, that the way the cap is represented is how the cash flow is going to be represented. But look, the initial question I get from most of the world is, when can my team get out of this? Which is hysterical, right? Because literally, Green Bay Packer fans, you just acquired this guy 11 seconds ago, and you heard about the contract, you saw the structure, and now all you care about is, what if we have to get out of this? It's a terrible approach, okay? Because this is one of the top 5 players in football. maybe one of the top 2 defenders in football, and he's on your team at age 26. So there's a lot more to be diving into than just how bad could this contract be for us. But I get it, all right? It's easy to steer negative. So there's your point. Let's just assume that everything's going swimmingly. They're going to exercise both these options and push the cap down the line. It's still just a 4-year contract. And, in March of 2028, the agency, David Mulligutta and Athletes First, will be dying for a new contract from the Green Bay Packers for 2 reasons. Will be 2 years left on this deal, and he'll be 29 going on 30 in the 2028 season. So it's a perfect time to start thinking about that third big contract. And that's assuming, by the way, that things are going great. He's going to stick long-term in Green Bay going forward, and there's no, rust to deal with on the outside looking in. However, and I'll steer into the negativity here just to kind of placate, let's say it's a mess, okay? Let's say there's an injury this year. Let's say the scheme fit just ain't working, and, maybe they'll fire a coach, but the same thing happens next season, all right? And now we're staring at $75 million of this guaranteed remaining. There's a chance to get out of that 2028 guarantee because it's not yet March 2027. That's $13 million. All right. That's sitting there to be had that you could chop off of the 136. So you could bring this down to $123 million essentially. And instead of having to take a massive dead cap hit down the line when you post June 1st release him in March of 2028, for instance, maybe you take that option bonus as full salary, take a large cap hit in 2026 or 2027, and then you can cut your losses when you have to release him. I'm just saying, the reason it's called an option bonus is that option exists. It's not likely. It's definitely not probable, but it exists. So if you're seeing some things with how we check the dead cap and the cash, these are all the conversations that we have internally, that the league has internally, and that year by year, the front offices have internally. And I will say one other thing with this, because there's a lot of people out there trying to manipulate future caps and cap hits and all that. And it's an unbelievably fun exercise if you're into this stuff. But this stuff is literally day by day. Literally. In fact, I've got 4 or 5 teams sitting minus cap right now with, the week 1 about to start in 3 days, 2.5 days, that are going to have to make cap conversions or trades or releases or something in the next 72 hours. So to think that anything is stable enough in this sport specifically to try to project out how the cap is going to look from a team perspective, from a player's perspective. All right. Yeah. Micah Parsons has $64 and $68 million cap hits right now at the back end of this contract. Okay. That doesn't mean that he's going to be cut then. It also doesn't mean that the Packers can't get out of this thing. All right. Based on everything I just kind of laid out for you. What it means is there's probably work to be done. However, in 2028, the salary cap is probably going to be $335 million. So 64 into that is around 17 to 18%. It's way too much for an edge rusher. But I just want you to understand that as this league grows, as this league salary cap grows, some of the numbers that teams are going to take on an annual basis are going to be somewhat eye-popping. And it's because, A, they don't want to push the cap down the line in certain instances, right? Maybe Dak Prescott for one of them. Some of these Cowboys players that may be looking to get the heck out of here soon. All right. But yeah, we have a player right now, and there's no way around it. Dak Prescott's going to carry a $50.5 million cap hit into 2025. That's after the cap conversion of his roster bonus and cap conversion of his base salary. All right. We're there. I mean, we're at a point in time. We've got 3, 4, 5, 6 other players with a 40-plus cap hit, 40 million plus cap hit for 2025. Yes, they're all quarterbacks, and that's a separate conversation. But Max Crosby's at 38 and change, so we're there. So when you see numbers like 50 and 60, 3, 4 years down the line, it's the likelihood that something's going to happen. Most likely, in this case, an extension. Okay, is prudent. But understand that we're going to have $60 million cap hits on the books, not converted, actual active cap within the next year, 2 years, because of where things are going. You know, when we get to our first 70 million per year player, look out. It's going to be hard to avoid stuff like that. And the cap can handle it because the league's growing at that kind of pace. So just some, I guess, the soapbox stuff surrounding this contract. But look, this is an absolutely rock solid 3-year contract that should have no problem being 4 for 165. And like I said, we're all talking extension at that point in time if things are going swimmingly. Not a lot of fluff. David Mulligetta doesn't like his fluff. Let's put it that way. Derek Stingley Jr.'s contract, pretty rock solid through 4 to 5 years, and Micah Parsons this contract as well, very rock solid for a newly acquired player that cost a player plus 2 first-round picks. There's a lot to go into this. We broke down some of the trade stuff on Friday with Dan Soman, and the contract is what it is in its full glory here on Spotrac.com. So we're dealing with cash flows of 45, 40, 38, and 41 over the next 4 years. That's very un-Green Bay-like as well. Okay, the triple bonus structure, this is all brand new to them, and the Jordan Love contract is certainly the comp. So take a look at this. You can see that the triple bonus structure has kept these cap hits extremely doable for the first 3 seasons, little under 10, little over 19, and about 26 and change through 2027. So there's no need to discuss Micah Parsons and the salary cap for the next 3 seasons as long as those option bonuses are exercised. Okay. All right, moving along here, there's a bunch of pieces now live and a couple more coming on Spotrac.com surrounding the NFL, kind of the nerdy stuff this time of year, right? So we took a look at basically every active 53-man roster plus any of the reserve lists. So the injured list, the suspension list, the PUP list, because those players, at least right now, are included in the active conversation, right? They could be brought up, activated within the next 3 to 4 weeks. Some of those suspensions go a little longer. We'll see with some of those injuries. Yes, some of these players will be lopped off the reserve list and released into open markets. But for now, at least with week 1 upon us, a snapshot look at how some of these teams are built from an active plus reserve standpoint. I did a stacked bar graph for every team. And what it is it's an offense positional breakdown and a defense positional breakdown. And what I used is I used the average salary of these contracts. I just think for things like this, it's the at least fairest route to go. And I don't say that often about the average salary because it's jaded when you get down to things like new money versus old money and things like that. But, the cap is so flexible, so fluid. It's disingenuous to use cap hits in these kind of things. And cash, a lot of teams front load with signing bonuses. So you get yourself, and by the way, the rookie wage scale is front loaded with signing bonuses. So you get yourself in situations where year 1 is massive cash. But if you're in year 2 or year 3 of a contract, generally speaking, things come way down. So just to sort of balance the data set out a little bit, I use the average salary. So what you're looking at here is for any given team, a stacked bar graph of how the quarterbacks are allocated, the running backs, the wide receivers, the tight ends, and the entire offensive line. Again, active and reserve lists, so not practice squad, not dead cap, active quarterback room, active running back room, et cetera, et cetera. And there's variance, obviously. So we give you the full stacked bar graph for the visual aspect of it. I broke down some of the notable notes by position group here in the piece. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the full data set in table format by position group, as we mentioned here, including the entire total offensive numbers here. And you can bang those into a sort and rank those and see some of the bigger points, which is Philadelphia is absolutely crushing the rest of the league, offensively speaking, from a contractual standpoint. And that should surprise absolutely nobody, because every 3 weeks we're on here talking about a brand new extension for the Philadelphia Eagles. And, not blockbuster extensions, but pot sweetener extensions. Well, Saquon Barkley had a great year. Let's make sure he's happy for the next 2 years. Let's adjust some things, lower his cap hit, up his cash hit, and go from there. And when you do that 3, 4, 5, 6 times every offseason, you're going to be at the top of this list because your AAVs are going to be rising, even though not necessarily speaking the cash is that much more. Okay, so There's ways to do this that makes everybody happy, but at the end of the day, data sets like this are going to have you at the top of the list. And that's exactly where the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers find themselves right now. Should be no surprise to you that Cincinnati rounds out the top three with their big active offseason for Chase and Hendrickson, sort of, and Higgins, and the Burrow contract on the books as well. But you can sort here and find out who sits at the top of all these lists. Again, this is combined average salaries for all contracts on the active 53 or on any reserve list for the upcoming, at least week one, right? The snapshot version of that. And I talk about all the tops and all the bottoms of these lists within these little snapshot breakdowns. So let's talk about some of the greater points. I think it's interesting that the average offense is around 157 right now in terms of AAVs. If you put that up against the league salary cap of 279.2, we're talking about 56%. So, where was that 10, 15 years ago? I wish I had that kind of data, but I bet, if I had to guess, that defense was taking over the league at that point in time still. If you think about the Seahawks and the Steelers and how many of these, the 49ers, how many of these teams were built, your big players were the edge rushers, were the linebackers, were certainly the secondary, okay? So to have us in a conversation now where 56% of the finances on average, some teams have much, much more, on average, are allocated toward the offensive side of the football. Yep, a lot of that is quarterback, okay, as you can see here in the blue, all right? Generally speaking, the team's largest allocation goes to their quarterback. Now, if we're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles and this $247 million allocation, think about that out of a 279 cap, okay? And you can understand just how much from a percentage point they are allocating by continuing to go and go and go and go with these contract extensions. The O-lines have exploded, and not just because of old school left tackle blindsides being paid handsomely. The center market was reset by Creed Humphrey. The guard market was reset by Trey Smith. The right tackle market has been reset a couple times over now. And everybody's doing well if you're a formidable top 5 or 6 offensive lineman on a team right now. So of that total 157 average, the average offensive line costs $57 million of it, leaving it only $100 million for the rest of this roster. And I can tell you right now, quarterbacks are dominating that percentage point too. So, look, this is a good number for running backs. It means that, generally speaking, the top running back on your team is making at least $8 to $9 million because you're carrying 4. 2 or 3 of them are probably near minimum, okay, near $900 to $1 million. And generally speaking, that means most teams have, on average, a $9 million starting running back. That's a good sign. Okay, we took a dip there for a couple years. Things are brightening up a little bit in that regard, and certainly with Saquon at 20 and Derrick Henry at 19 and the James Cooks and the Jonathan Taylors and the Kyron Williams of the world getting at least in the teens from a guarantee standpoint, it's in a good spot. And then obviously the wide receivers have exploded from everything from Chase and Higgins to McLaurin and up and down the line. But the average wide receiver room right now costs $36.5 million in terms of combined average salaries. And your Bengals are double that at $73.5 million right now. So that's interesting stuff to some people out there. You can break down all the data, like I said, on this piece. And I'm going to click right over to the defensive side of it here because that is obviously the yin to this yang. Not too many significant outliers like we had with the offense, right? No, the Rams are the outlier because of what they're not doing defensively. Doesn't mean they're going to be bad. In fact, they have 1 or 2 players that any team in the world would be dreaming of, starting with Jared Verse, who might be in the next 24 months one of the next big $50 to $55 million defensive contracts in history. So we'll see where that ends up. But look, the allocations here for Pittsburgh are nicely spread out in terms of the TJ Watts of the world and the off-ball linebackers being paid in that team. But similarly, edge rushers, interior defensive linemen, linebackers in yellow, cornerbacks in green, and safeties in orange to round out this stacked bar graph. Again, notable notes and a full data set breakdown table. And you can see that it's the Houston Texans. Is that a trivia question you would have gotten right in 3 guesses? I bet not. The Houston Texans just edging out the Pittsburgh Steelers with the top allocation on the defensive side of the ball. Houston's got not only some paid vets, and they've sweetened Danielle Hunter's pot a little bit here. The Stingley Jr. contract was obviously a big haymaker to this offseason. They've also got a bunch of first-round picks, which from an average salary standpoint, get you into the 12s and 13 millions per year, even on the rookie contract. So, there's a lot of things building into this allocation, but this is a well-paid defense. It's how they're going to win a lot of ball games this year. And Pittsburgh, much of the same, okay? There's a lot more balance with how some of these teams structure things out, and that's why you see a pretty natural line going right there, all right? And those aren't slouch teams, all right? That's your Chicagos and your Buffaloes and your Denvers and your Detroits and your Minnesotas and your Patriots, all right? And your Washington Commanders, pretty much all falling down this 145-ish, 140-ish line of defensive allocations. 47% of the current salary cap is allocated in terms of the average defensive allocation. And this is the most fascinating point to talk about, in my opinion. The edge rusher has a $35 million average room, and the IDL is at 31. And this is the group over the past few off seasons that has really stormed to the top. Okay, constant market resets, constantly teams allocating for it. In fact, if you believe Jerry Jones, they wanted the IDL instead of the edge rusher because they need to stop the run and put pressure on the inside of their defensive line. The linebacker, the off-ball linebacker, it's been a rough couple of years, as you know. And a lot of teams just are foregoing these contracts, going back to the draft for it. But we do have some healthy contracts on the Bears, the Commanders, to name a few. Baltimore's got Roquan. So there's some contracts living out there still that are keeping these averages up. But if you look between linebackers and safeties, kind of the two devalued pieces in this defensive system, they're kind of neck and neck right now. So where cornerbacks have been massively reset this offseason with 5 haymakers, and the IDLs have been sliding up for the past 3 off seasons, the edge got a nice boost with Garrett and Watt and Parsons, obviously. And Hamilton did boost this group, but it's still kind of hanging in the balance right now. And we'll see if there's a couple more safeties, maybe versatile players like Hamilton that can come out and really continue to push this thing forward. But it's bringing up the rear right now, defensively speaking, in terms of how these allocations lay out. That's live right now on SpotCheck.com. Please enjoy. Please tweet. Please respond with comments. I like doing these things, and I like getting feedback to make them better going forward. And last but not least today, let's talk about free agency, because we are in the twilight days of the NFL offseason officially. We've got week 1 here. Thursday's opener is just upon us. So let's talk about some of these free agent numbers. Okay, and I'll do a little comparison and contrast. 546 contracts on the books, according to our free agent tracker, accounting for just over $3.7 billion total value. Of that, just over $2 billion total guarantees. So that's a pretty strong number. I can tell you right now, going backwards, anything over 50% is good in my book. I want it to get better every year. It has gotten better every year. And in fact, that 2.1-ish billion of guaranteed allocation is almost 56% of the total value. That's a great number. All right, it's an excellent number. It means 2 things. Teams are giving in more to these guarantees, 1, and 2, maybe more importantly, we are stripping the fluff away from these contracts. The longest contract in free agency was 5 years, given out to Will Freeze, a guard for the Minnesota Vikings. It's 5 for $87, with $44 million of that guarantee, basically a 2-year deal, right? 2 for $35 and change on the full guarantee. That's the most fluff we have in NFL free agency this year. That's it. Okay? Everybody else going forward is a 4-year deal, a 3-year deal with 1 or 2 years fully guaranteed now and a chance to get an extra year down the road. It's exactly where we should be. Now, you could sit here and say we should have fully guaranteed contracts. I'd love to see it. And there's a lot of people that would love to see that. Unfortunately, I can tell you right now, the Kirk Cousins and the Deshaun Watson projects that were fully guaranteed free agent contracts, or at least extensions in Deshaun's case, were absolutely explosively terrible. So the 2 comps, the 2 examples we have, and they're good examples, blew up in our faces. So I can sit here and tell you we should be pushing for that with every day that we get closer to the next iteration of the CBA. I just don't think it's realistic. So let's focus on trimming these contracts, pumping in the guarantees, continuing to build in early vesting triggers, because that essentially locks this stuff in and or makes teams buy you out and gets you to the open market even faster. One of the two, Russell Wilson, right? So a lot of good things with free agency. Wasn't the biggest free agent year, okay? Any free agent tracker that starts with Milton Williams as your top total value getter isn't going to have the best overall class, but Sam Darnold somewhat underachieved after his kind of flop down the stretch in 2024. And it was a big year for free agent offensive linemen. It was a big year for them, right? Aaron Banks, Dan Moore, Will Freese, massive contract extensions. Dan Moore getting $50 million guaranteed to join Tennessee, something the Titans have to do right now, not unlike what Carolina has been doing the past couple off seasons. They know that they are kind of at the bottom of people's wish lists, but $50 million can make a lot of people say yes instead of no. So good to see some of those things come to fruition. Is free agency still a bad value? Yes, of course it is. Okay, there's a hell of a lot of teams that are looking at $55 million guaranteed for Sam Darnold and saying we would never have gone that route. And I think Minnesota is one of them, by the way. But these are where risks happen. And if you hit on one of these risks, there's no value in it for you because you've overpaid on the open market. But this is where contenders get that extra round in the playoffs. This is where fringe contenders make the playoffs. You have to hit everywhere. You have to be good at drafting and developing. You have to be savvy enough and take risks to go out there and make trades when they're available to you. You have to know who to keep and how to keep them extension-wise, Jerry Jones. And you have to know when the time is right to go and strike on a bit of an overpay in free agency. And there are some teams that are just completely against this. And Dallas is, of course, one of them. All right, Dallas has spent the last decade completely avoiding the free agent market. Are they not a draw and players don't want to go there? No. They don't want to overpay, which means players don't want to go there. All right? So the usual suspects are going to stay off of this list. But for the most part, it was a very successful $3.7 billion free agency. And if we just quickly compare that to what we had in 2024, I can tell you right now, decent numbers. All right. 2024 was $3.6 billion with just about $2 billion of that total guaranteed. So all the numbers we want to continue to see, that's what we're looking for with constant growth in our guaranteed percentages, constant decreases in the fluff and the trimming and the overall contract values. And I'm going to flip the quick to one more view on SpotTrack, which is the NFL contract tracker. Literally has full breakdowns for every contract on the books. And I can tell you right now, because of the way things have gone, the Patrick Mahomes 10-year contract remains the unicorn. All right. Josh Allen's brand new 6-year contract with the Buffalo Bills is now the second place longest contract in the NFL. 10 and a 6. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9. We've got 25-year contracts. All right. And then a world of 4-year deals. Those numbers, even just 5 years ago, were significantly higher at the top because teams want to control. Teams wanted you under control so that you had to publicly go out and try to get out of these contracts versus my contract's almost up. Let's talk about this. Okay. The pressure on the front office is the best way to operate right now if you can play this game. Every other sport has figured this out, with the exception maybe of baseball because of the way that the service control situation is structured. But when you've got a small rookie wage scale and you can get into veteran status quickly, this is the way to do it. Short, sweet, high guarantees, and force the front office to continue to put pressure on things like we've seen with so many of these quarterback contracts and now many of these other positional groups continuing to catch up. So it's good news. It continues to be better every offseason. This offseason has been no different. And just for disclaimers, we'll continue to obviously update these transactions. I think we'll have a couple more big, decent-sized moves, maybe a couple of extensions. I think a kicker extension coming out of Dallas here, which is always fun to detail. But keep an eye on the pulse on the transaction wire as we head towards official week 1. Teams have to be cap compliant starting tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern. There's some work to do there, so keep an eye out for some gymnastics and maneuvering on the salary cap. And then my job is going to be down and dirty inside these contracts. I've got a lot of the incentives already built out. If you haven't viewed our incentive tracker for many of these sports, but for the NFL specifically, I have done the work to kind of allocate many of these incentives so that they can be tracked throughout the year. There's a lot of brand new contracts I have to get to in that regard, but we will be pushing that out as things get close, as things get near, because the Week 18 incentive chase is one of my favorite parts of all of sports. Okay. I'm sure you remember the Mike Evans situation last year and a few other ones, but lots of these contracts have intricate, playing time, receptions, rushes, touchdowns, Pro Bowl, All Pro, all that stuff built into these things. Most of them do at that point in time. And I'm spending a lot of time not only unearthing those, but allocating them into a trackable entity so that we can just week in and week out update our stats and have these things be going live. So you can kind of track them along with us live on these incentives pages on Spotrac.com. Pretty nerdy stuff, but that's the going rate when you're doing this kind of labor for love, even on Monday, Labor Day, here in good old Buffalo, New York. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Ginnitti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spotrac Podcast.